the first step in emotional regulation skill is to recognize your emotions, be able to name them, realize how important they are, how do they help us, how they don't, because everything has a pro and con, right? So mindful practice is the repeated effort of bringing the mind back to the awareness of the present moment. And that is a very important principle, that if you get distracted while practicing, you bring yourself back to the practice or the instructions of that mindful practice. So the more you do that, of getting distracted, because that's going to happen, and then coming and focusing your mind onto what is in the present, just like the physical exercise that develops core muscles, DBT helps develop the inner wisdom, the mental muscle, and use it to learn and improve people's threshold for distress and pain that is inevitable in the world. So stress and pain is something that is going to happen. We can't stop that. But how do we deal with that is the focus of DBT. Sit in a comfortable yet attentive position. Close your eyes, or just lower your gaze at a comfortable point in front of you. To begin with, just in your mind, rate your comfort level on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 means least comfortable, and 10 means very comfortable. So keep that in mind, because I'll ask you to rate your comfort level at the very end too. So as you start this exercise, notice your breath. Notice your breath going in and out. As you continue to breathe in and out, notice its temperature. Notice its pace, how long you breathe in, how long you breathe out. Is one longer than the other? Without trying to change it. Observe if there are any differences between you inhale and exhale at any level. Try to stay in the present moment of noticing your breath as it is. Try not to judge or push yourself for things to be different in the present experience. Just accept things as they are. If a judgmental thought arises, just notice it and let it be. Focus yourself and your mind to noticing your breath for a bit. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, as you continue breathing, notice any physical sensations in your body, whether it is in the upper, including your head, face, neck, or shoulders. Then the middle parts, if your body, including your chest, back muscles, or stomach areas. Or lower parts of your body, including your hips, upper legs, and your lower legs and feet. Just notice the sensations without trying to change them. Just acknowledge the physical sensations as it is. You can describe the sensation to yourself. If you can't find words, that's all right too. Just continue to scan your body, noticing these different sensations in your body parts. As we move into the final third minute, bring your attention back to your breath and start breathing at a more regular pace. Try breathing in more deeply and more regularly. Breathe in and then breathe out. Breathe at a pace that is comfortable and easy to maintain. Breathe in and breathe out. Inhale and exhale gently, comfortably, and with ease. Continue breathing at this more comfortable pace and notice their impact of deeper and regular breathing on your body parts. Continue observing this comfortable pace of breathing as you inhale and exhale deeply and regularly. As we come to the end of this exercise, return your attention to the room we are in, and let's proceed to engage in this talk more mindfully. As we come to this end and you open your eyes, just notice where your comfort level is now. Remember, we rated from 0 to 10, 0 being least comfortable and 10 meaning highly comfortable. Based on the research, there are 3 main sources of stress for human beings. These are biological, psychological, and social factors. All 3 are interdependent and transactional. Each one impacts the other, and therefore each person has a unique set of stressors and how they get impacted by them. Interestingly, though biological factors preset our capacities in some domains like our IQ or physical capacities, the environment can play a very vital role in either enhancing these capacities or suppressing them. For example, many people cope effectively with traumatic life events without succumbing to severe mental health problems because of their personal resilience or coping skills that they have learned from maybe the people around them over time. So we know only about 20 to 25% who people who experience traumatic events will develop PTSD or depression or anxiety disorders. So human beings are quite resilient in that way. Again, at the present moment, we do not have a gauge or an instrument to find out exactly how much biological factors and how much environmental factors play a role in development of our mental health issues or our wellness and how we sort of respond to our stressors. However, the good news is that people with biological disposition for diabetes, for example, or psychosis, which are considered to be more genetically endowed, can decrease the probability of developing these illnesses or disorders if they engage in a healthier lifestyle or take preventative measures. Though the biosocial psychological model can be quite complex, I want to provide you with some concrete examples of how sources of stress in the world we live in have an impact on us. And what are those sources? So the number one is the physical environment that you live in. It can raise your stress level by sort of impacted your senses, especially, for example, if you were living in a place where there's a lot of road traffic, noises like sirens keeping you up at the night, barking dog next door, or uncomfortable or unsafe living conditions can also cause stress. So living conditions do have an impact on our mental health. Family and relationships, which are inevitable, are commonly daily stresses for us, especially if people have marital disagreements, unhealthy relationships, estrangements with their loved ones, dealing with rebellious teens, or caring for an ill family member or a child with maybe special needs, can all send stress levels skyrocketing. Another factor that can be contributing to our stress can be work, and it is an ever-present source of stress for most of us. Work stress is caused by things such as job dissatisfaction, an exhausting workload, insufficient pay, office politics, and conflicts with your boss or co-workers. I'm pretty sure we all have experienced some aspect of these stresses in our lives, or maybe still are. Another common source of stress for us is our life situations, which can create a lot of stress. For example, something that I mentioned earlier of could be poverty, financial pressures, discrimination or harassment at work or in relationships, unemployment, isolation, and or a lack of social support. All of these can take a toll on our daily quality of life. Another aspect that can create a stress for us is major life changes or events, such as even a happy event like birth of a baby. It can be stressful. A divorce, a career change, or promotion, or move that can bring a lot of stress on you, even though the event is positive. Generally speaking, we might term it as positive. Any adjustment to big changes in our lives, or a lot of changes, which might be small, but in a short period of time, can create a lot of stress. And the recent years have been very demanding, right? I know COVID seems to have been gone past, but it created a mayhem at many levels, right? The lockdowns, the uncertainty of how long this will continue, the constant what ifs, and its impact on economy and relationships was quite devastating. Despite a lot of loss, the people did survive through the difficult times because humans are resilient by nature. We problem solve, we deal with it, we cope with it. And now I think the more concern is the economic, the financial, and the political changes that are occurring in the North American area. And I think that has been causing a lot of stress for people in Canada and other countries too. The good news is that the wisdom is inherent in us. And therapy helps to unlock this wisdom more quickly and intentionally. We all make use of our wise mind, as I will talk about this in a while. But therapy just sort of quickens that pace. It helps you to understand what could be a barrier, what's causing the trouble to access our wise mind, and therefore we can address that barrier and reach into our wisdom more easily. I think a fitting analogy can be of a jar that gets jammed and needs additional force or a tool to open it, right? So sometimes our personal coping skills are sufficient to address the distress we are experiencing because of these external and internal stresses. However, when our emotional battery runs out, we need help from outside sometimes. That could mean reaching out for support from loved ones or seeking professional help. So remember, stress is never going to stop, unfortunately, but we know how to deal with it. If we know how to deal with it, then the more we address and deal with our stresses, we are less distressed ourselves, and we will end up having less of emotional dysregulation as compared to if we didn't know how to deal with it, right? So before I jump into any skills to address this stress management, I will shift into a related topic of how mind and body are related and what can be done to make ourselves physically and mentally healthy. And before I do that, another thing that I want to mention is that although we keep talking about stress as unhealthy, troublesome, an issue that we are dealing with and don't know what to do about it, stress can be useful too. If we had no stress or we weren't even concerned about any challenges in our life that need to be addressed, what will happen is we'll be very demotivated. We won't have the energy to address it. So everybody has a bit of an optimal level of stress that will help them to address and deal with our daily problems or hassles. And most of us do that. However, when the the force of stress goes higher, if things get piled up or each of our stress levels are getting higher, that is where the trouble will kind of create more issue for us. And it's important to remember that we need to manage that stress ongoing. Just remember that it's important to remember that stress itself is not a mental illness. But when the stress keeps piling up and it starts to make you feel worse instead of motivating you, it can harm your mental health and well-being. Stress is a risk factor for someone who is already vulnerable to developing a mental health disorder. So stress can affect us physically and mentally. For example, people who have experienced a lot of stress can end up with high blood pressure. In the long run, people can develop chronic health issues. And that has been research evidence that chronic stress that stays with us will have impact on our body in the long term. It brings our immunity down. Just like when we have more of illness before exams, students tend to get sick more often because their stress level is high, and they will get sick more often before exams rather in the middle of the term. So there is a lot of correlation between developing physical ill health with stress. As I said before, we now know for sure that mind and body are connected. And you can't take care of one without acknowledging the other. This holistic viewpoint is integral to DBT. Physical health acts as a protection against emotional dysregulation. And some of the skills are based on this principle. And on the other hand, poor physical conditions can cause considerable emotional distress. Just think how quickly we become grumpy when we have a cold or flu or fever, right? You will discover today, when I describe the different DBT skills, that some of them focus on physical well-being to reduce the vulnerability that we might have for emotional dysregulation. For example, please skills that I will talk about emphasizes self-care with reference to physical health, eating habits, avoiding mood-altering substances, especially alcohol or even caffeine, like excessive caffeine, sleep habits, and exercise. If we are taking care of these aspects, we are less likely to be emotionally dysregulated in a challenging situation. It's just that you are less predisposed to be emotionally upset in a difficult situation. It's not guaranteed, but it's high likely. So we will also learn that most of the crisis survival skills work to slow down the brain. That helps people to step away from behaviors that can be considered in DBT language ineffective, or what we could call impulsivity, where we end up either using substances, engage in self-harming behaviors, or relationship and other harming behaviors, and which we typically regret afterwards, or it actually doesn't solve the problem. So whenever we speak about ineffective behaviors, it's a behavior that might help you to cope in the moment, but it doesn't really help you in the long term and might make things worse for you. So what are we going to do about that? We will talk about those skills as we move forward in this communication and webinar. Now I'm going to show you how DBT addresses different aspects of stress. So as we just spoke about, that mind and body connection is the fundamental principle on which DBT is built upon. So DBT is actually built on the biosocial psychological model. That factors like genetic predisposition, body chemistry, social, environmental factors, and our own psychological temperament interact with each other in a very complex manner. That is why some people under the same circumstances deal with stress effectively and others don't. DBT looks for these shared and unique factors and addresses them by combining acceptance and change skills to help people. So you'll be hearing these two words, acceptance and change, because these are the foundational principles on which DBT skills are built upon. Although they seem opposite to each other, but they actually are sort of connected. And I'll talk about it as we speak about the skills. Just like the physical exercise that develops core muscles, DBT helps develop the inner wisdom, the mental muscle, and use it to learn and improve people's threshold for distress and pain that is inevitable in the world. So stress and pain is something that is going to happen. We can't stop that. But how do we deal with that is the focus of DBT. As you see on the slide, DBT focuses to reduce suffering and pain, develop resilience to cope with stress, deal with interpersonal challenges, and manage emotions in an effective manner. So it's kind of very comprehensive and holistic. The ultimate goal is to develop a mindful lifestyle, actually, and develop a life that is worth living, which has meaning, which has purpose, and it helps you to move forward in your life because you know which path you're going to pick up because you've really thought about it in relation to the values that you hold important. Now we are going to kind of shift gears and dig deeper into the different skills that DBT is comprised of and learn the rationale and the objectives of each set of skills. As you see, there are 4 modules that comprise the DBT package, and they are mindfulness, distress tolerance, interpersonal skills, and emotional regulation, if you go anti-clockwise. Or it could have been the other way. The reason I read them that way is because the skill modules on the left-hand side of the screen are based on acceptance model, the mindfulness and distress tolerance, whereas the ones on the right-hand side are based on the change model. DBT skills can be considered the meaty part of a burger or a sandwich, or the main portion of a meal. There are so many other things that will make these skills work, actually. So the DBT structure, whether the person is in individual therapy or group therapy, the philosophical assumptions that on which these DBT package is built upon, can be considered to be the buns that hold the main filling. So without those outer layers or the buns, this skill set would not work. So we have a lot of background philosophy behind how these will work, and therefore we make the complete package. So that is why it is very holistic. And again, if one part of it's not complete, it will not have the outcome, right? So the 4 modules that you can see over here, as I mentioned, are used in individual therapy and also group therapy. And people can manage to learn these skills in either situation. The typical gold standard model of DBT is to attend individual sessions and group therapy sessions together because that makes it the outcome quite effective. When I speak about acceptance and change, it seems that they are both opposite, but acceptance is actually a catalyst for change to occur. So unless we accept things or situations or thoughts or emotions without judgment, mindful way, we are not actually able to move forward and bring changes. So sometimes many therapies in the past would focus on problem behaviors and try to change them by changing thinking or behaviors only. But unless that acceptance has occurred, the change is harder to engage in or process. So DBT focuses a lot, half part of that whole story is to work on acceptance, and then it becomes a catalyst for change. So DBT actually brings together those two things that seem to be opposite, that is acceptance and change, to achieve better treatment results. So DBT promotes acceptance and change of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to manage and to reduce mental health problems. The fundamental idea of DBT is that opposites can coexist and be harmonized. It aims to bring a balance between empathy and acceptance while staying focused on changing problematic behaviors. For example, you may need both validation of where you are in your life, as well as motivation to try harder to create positive changes. Through DBT therapy, people learn to recognize and accept their current situation, weigh out different points of view, and work on a balanced effort to change. To achieve the best results, DBT group training focus on 4 ways to build life skills, and individual therapy helps them to sort of look into the individualized or idiosyncratic nuances to working out those skills. And basically, DBT generally leads to changes in ways of thinking, ways of managing emotions, ways of relating to others, and also ways of dealing with distress. Now, let's talk about the 4 sets of skills one by one. I will be giving a brief overview of these modules because of time constraints of this webinar, and there's a lot underlying these skills, but I'm hoping that my information will provide you create sufficient curiosity to read more about these skills, and if you need, engage in therapy yourself to work towards a life that is worth living. All right, so first set of skills is mindfulness. And the definition is typically said to be, it is the act of consciously focusing the mind in the present moment without judgment and without attachment to the moment. When mindful, we are aware in the present moment. We can contrast mindfulness with automatic, habitual, or rote behaviors and activities. When mindful, we are alert and awake, like a sentry guarding a gate. We sometimes cling to the present moment as if we could keep a present moment from changing if we cling hard enough. But we all know that present never stays the same. The only consistent thing in our world is change, right? So mindful practice is the repeated effort of bringing the mind back to the awareness of the present moment. And that is a very important principle, that if you get distracted while practicing, you bring yourself back to the practice or the instructions of that mindful practice. So the more you do that of getting distracted, because that's going to happen, and then coming and focusing your mind onto what is in the present, that creates that mental muscle and the ability to control your mind or control your focus or your attention. This is something that really helps people who have a diagnosis of ADHD, because their attention span is short and they're unable to focus on things. And practicing mindfulness and using this principle has helped a lot of people to have more focus on the present moment. So the more practice is needed. Again, in some, mindfulness is the practice of entering into the current moment without reserve or grudge, entering into the cosmic process of existence with awareness that life is a process of constant change. And mindfulness practice teaches us to move into the moment and become aware of everything in it and becoming more functional. There are 3 goals or outcomes of practicing mindfulness on a regular basis. So regular practice is the core theme that will make therapy work. So if you just know things, they're not work most of the time. So a lot of practice is needed to learn and become proficient in those skills so that when the adversity or challenging situation comes into play, you're able to slide into that practice more effectively and without any trouble. So people who practice mindfulness on a regular basis, research has shown that it reduces suffering and it increases happiness. So kind of a shift, right? And then, as I was mentioning, it can increases the control of your mind, basically because it decreases reactivity to mental events or distractions. So it's like, okay, I got distracted by this sound, by this thought, this emotion, but I'm going to go back to it. So the more you move, the more mental muscle you develop, and you are able to intentionally focus on what is at hand in the present. And the third outcome or goal of mindfulness is to experience reality as it is. Again, this is more related to even experiencing pain or positive emotions, having this connection with the universe, which can address loneliness a lot, because you might be by yourself and alone, but what will you experience, right? If you feel that connection with the universe, there's a likelihood that you will not feel lonely. And that's what many people have experienced in the long run. Again, the first set of skills that are used to practice mindfulness is the wise mind, as you can see on this screen and the slide. Wise mind is the synthesis of emotional mind and reasonable mind. So what DBT says is that we have three states of mind: the emotional mind, the reasonable mind, and the middle overlap of wise mind, which is the synthesis of these two. Emotional mind is something that is working only on emotions, and therefore it doesn't take into account any logic. It's not pragmatic. It creates those urges to act on something because it is creating pain and distress. And therefore, many a times people who are mostly in emotional mind they experience a lot of pain and suffering, and they can't really address their problems effectively because there has to be some logic and pragmaticness to solve problems also. Emotional mind is very different from strong emotions, which are sometimes really helpful, because if you are really in a danger, a severe, or I wouldn't say severe, a fear would be a appropriate emotion, because it will help you to jump into that fight, flight, fright mode to survive that difficult situation, because the danger is in front of you. However, if you are anxious about something that might go wrong in the future, and there's very low probability of that happening, or you're not even sure if it'll happen, and if you get stuck with it and because of your emotional mind, then you will be experiencing anxiety all over without able to attend or problem solve the situation. On the other hand, the reasonable mind is totally logical, pragmatic, rational, and it doesn't account for any emotions. So anybody who would be totally in a reasonable mind would be very emotional, might be seen as very cold or not in touch with the emotions, and they will probably lack empathy, I think. A very severe example, or a strong example, which Marshall Linehan, who developed DBT, gives of a person who's totally in a reasonable mind, is a hired assassin who engages in killing people but doesn't feel any emotions. So being in either of the two minds is usually not really effective. It is only when emotions and reason combine together that we are able to be effective in the moment and be able to acknowledge and honor our emotions, but still think effectively to problem solve or address the issue that is at hand. So wise mind is something that is considered to be with us. The inner wisdom that I mentioned earlier is inherent in every person. However, it sometimes becomes a little challenging, especially if you're already in an emotional mind, to access your wise mind. Therefore, practicing mindful practices for accessing your wise mind helps us to be in a wise mind more often, especially when we are not in a distressing moment. So practice skills or mindful practices when you are not stressed out. So practicing mindfulness on a regular basis at particular time in the day, or maybe 3 days a week, could be a good practice that will help you to access the wise mind more easily when you are emotionally charged or experiencing a lot of stress. The what skills is the second set of skills that help us to practice mindfulness. And what they say is they include observe. This is a skill by itself. Describe and participate. So observe is more about using grounding skills, like when we use our 5 senses, right? 5 things to see, 4 things to feel, touch, for example, listen to the sounds, smell if there is any odor around us or any smell around us, taste. So when we engage in using our 5 senses, we will come down into the present moment. Of course, it's not that we'll never have any thoughts or emotions coming up, but just noticing them is also part of observing without judgment. So it's like if I notice my emotion and if I judge myself for having that emotion, then I have to let go of that judgment, telling myself, oh, this is just a thought. This is an anxiety thought. Let it be. I'm going to go back to my practice. So observing would come to that. Describing is adding words to your observation, but it's very important, and as you will probably learn when you practice these skills, that describe is adding words, factual words. So we will not add anything that is our own opinion, a judgment, or perhaps something that we would say is an interpretation of what we are observing through our 5 senses. So, of course, practice helps us to tease out these nuances when we are practicing these skills and be able to say if I'm describing things effectively or not, which is part of the how skills, as I will talk about them just afterwards. The third what skill is the participation, where you participate in any activity wholly and solely. For example, if I'm dancing, that I'm into it. I'm singing, that's it. If I'm cooking, that's it. Or if I'm in a meeting, that's what I'm going to do, and just participate as fully as possible. Not 100% possible all the time, but if you are able to do that, then you kind of immersed in the moment and you feel the whole experience wholly, and therefore you are in the present moment. So when you practice what skills, they are supposed to be done one at a time. So either observe, describe, or participate, not all together. The other set of skills that are part of the mindful practice from the DBT perspective is the how skills. And these are the soft skills that make what skills refined or effective. These 3 skills are practiced together in comparison to what I said about what skills. So if we are practicing observing, then we will try our best to observe without judgment, do one thing at a time, and be as effective as we can. Remember that we are not perfect beings, so we can have a good practice experience one day and another not so good practice day. And that is fine. Practicing regularly makes us more effective in reaching the goals of mindful practice, that is to decrease suffering, increase happiness, have more control over our mind, and create that connection with the reality. It's just like if we go to the gym to pick up weights every day, we develop our muscles more quickly. and can move from lighter weights to picking up heavier weights in a shorter time period, right? So practicing skills in the background is actually really useful to learn those skills and become effective and proficient in using them. And that helps you to access your wise mind more effectively. This module of distress tolerance teaches coping strategies or skills for dealing with difficult situations and emotions. Using an analogy of a house on fire, the distress tolerance skills are crucial for the first level of treatment, as they help people learn how to stop setting more fires and make sure that the fire that has been started does not spread further and cause more damage. For example, it will help people to stay or step away from an impulsive behavior of using substances, engaging in self-harming behaviors, or being impulsively reactive when they are feeling intense anger or emotional pain, to sort of get rid of that impulse, we engage in behaviors that we call ineffective. Impulsive behaviors that result due to high distress, which can be considered problematic, include, as I mentioned earlier, substance use, self-harming, even suicidal behaviors, unhealthy eating pattern, screaming or shouting at someone can have adverse effects or kind of consequences that we will regret in the long run. So if we are engaging in a behavior that doesn't really solve the problem, or it worsens the situation and makes you more miserable afterwards, or it maintains that misery, then that's an ineffective behavior, and we need to sort of step away from that impulse. So crisis survival skills that I'm going to talk about typically address that portion or experience. She has mentioned that DBT focuses, because it's on acceptance, so it emphasizes that benefits of learning to bear pain skillfully is really useful. The ability to tolerate and accept distress is an essential mental health goal for at least two reasons. One, pain and distress are part of life. We can't get rid of them. They cannot be entirely avoided or removed. They'll keep happening. So the inability to accept this immutable fact itself leads to increased pain and suffering. So when we deny reality, then we are going to suffer more. So we might be experiencing pain, but when we reject reality, another layer of trouble comes in, which is suffering, and it bogs us down. So acceptance is really helpful. The second aspect is that distress tolerance, at least over the short run, is part and parcel of any attempt to change oneself. Otherwise, efforts to escape pain and distress, for example, as I mentioned, through impulsive actions, will interfere with efforts to establish desired outcomes. So distress tolerance skills not only enable us to survive immediate crises without making things worse, they also help us to accept reality when we can't change it, and it's not what we want it to be, right? Especially things that we have very little control over, like past events, certain policies, government policies, work policies, and lifestyles that are distinct from our own. I think these skills will be really useful if certain thoughts are running through your head. So it's kind of a cue as to, oh, I'm highly distressed right now. For example, if you are thinking, I can't stand this, this is indicative of low frustration tolerance. So distress tolerance is basically to increase that tolerance, right? It's unbearable. I hate this feeling. I must get rid of this. I can't cope with this, sorry. I'm going to lose control. Oh my God, this feeling will keep going on forever. It's wrong to feel like this. It's being weak. I'm being weak if I'm feeling like this. So all these thoughts are cue that you are highly distressed. For some, it might not be, but in most cases, they are. And therefore, when you are experiencing these kind of high stress and this impulse to engage in a behavior that you would probably regret afterwards, because it really didn't solve the problem, it made things worse for you, then it is useful to engage in some of the distress tolerance skills that I'm going to talk about. The first segment is the crisis survival skills. And I apologize that one of the skills that I've added on this slide is actually one of the reality acceptance skills is on the next segment. So I'll delete it for the next time. So stop skill, tip skills to change the body chemistry, pros and cons, positive distraction, self-soothing, and improve the moment are those skills that will help you to stop yourself from engaging in a behavior that would be considered very ineffective. And it's not going to give any solutions in the long run. And interestingly, these are not for emotional regulation. Although some people, when they engage in either stop or one of these crisis survival skills, they do experience emotional regulation, although that is not the goal. But it's great if that happens. But the aim of it is that if you're using this skill and you do not engage in that ineffective behavior that you have that impulse to, that means your skill is working. The aim is not that you should feel happy about it or you get rid of your unwanted emotions. No, that's not the goal. It's just more wanting to make sure that you do not set more fires for yourself or more make things worse for yourself, right? So these skills, again, need to be practiced, even though they are for crisis. It's very difficult to engage in these practices if you are highly emotional or in an emotional mind. So if you've been practicing these skills when you were less stressed out on a regular basis, then there's a likelihood that you will be able to use stop or even the tip skills, which include using cold water over your face or ice packs, intense exercises, muscle relaxation exercises, and paced breathing, which is one of the very useful technique that is used in the tip skills. The next segment is in distress tolerance skills is the radical acceptance skills. And these skills are more about situations that are probably not in your control. I'm not sure if you're aware of the circles of control that we typically talk about, that certain things are very much in our control, like our thoughts, feelings, or actions, or what's our attitude towards certain things. Those are more in our control, that's center circle. Then other people's behavior, what's going to be outcome of certain situations are more in the outer circle, where it's like we do might have some impact on that action, but we don't have total sort of control. And then the outer circle, like what is the government policy, what will the other country, when will they change the policy, what will be the outcome of a game or sports tournament, who's going to win this game, things that are, or death or loss of somebody or financial losses, being laid off, which is such a big stress in our lives nowadays because things are happening so quickly, and the economic and the financial world has become so unstable, and that is creating so much stress for all of us. So when things are not in our control, what can we use? Our acceptance reality skills, and one of the very useful skill is the radical acceptance of reality, which basically says that you accept the reality as it is, without, again, any shoulding or any rejection of the reality. However, that doesn't mean that you are going to be saying, this is great, I love this. So radically accepting reality does not mean that you are approving of the reality or you are agreeing with it or you're going to be passive about it. It's just that it is what it is. So if it's raining, And if I keep grumbling, why is it raining? I don't like rain. It shouldn't be raining. It makes my life miserable. Then I am not only going to experience pain, but I'm going to add that extra layer of suffering and be miserable. On the other hand, if I was more of like, it's raining and that's it, and then I go to my work, then I'm going to suffer less. So acceptance helps us a lot in experiencing, decreasing the distress that we might experience around things that we have no control over. There are other skills that can be used when we are trying to accept reality as it is, which is turning the mind, willingness, half smiling and willing hands, which is a very simple exercise of having a smile, which is gentle, and then opening your hands and arms, keeping a posture which we consider open posture. And you know what? It has an impact on our body and mind. And this is that body-mind connection being used. Interestingly, mindfulness of current thoughts, as I mentioned, again, the term is mindfulness of current thoughts. It is using the mindfulness of observing your current thoughts and even describing them. That itself can be very useful in decreasing your distress because you are accepting the thoughts that you have as they are without trying to change them. So it's really useful tool. And probably as you read more or learn more about these skills, you will learn that mindfulness actually runs through all the skills that are part of DBT, whether they are distress tolerance, whether they are emotional regulation skills, or even interpersonal skills. So you can see that the layer of mindfulness is already embedded in distress tolerance skill. This slide highlights the different emotional regulation skills as mentioned earlier, focusing on being mindful of one's emotions without being judgmental and accepting them as they are before working towards either decreasing their intensity or changing them into more effective emotions. So remember, emotional regulation skill is not to get rid of our unwanted emotions. That's probably not going to happen. But the more we practice these skills, the likelihood is that that emotional dysregulation will be less intense, like it will not go up that high, not guaranteed, but the probability is that, and the frequency of emotional dysregulation goes down, and how long you remain dysregulated, the duration gets shorter. So advantage is that when you practice emotional regulation skills, the frequency, the duration and intensity of your emotions will mellow down. And yeah, emotions will be there, and we cannot be devoid of emotion because we wouldn't be human if we had no emotions. So emotions which are less intense can actually be motivating factors. They help us to address problems more effectively and therefore engage or use our wise mind more effectively. So the first step in emotional regulation skill is to recognize your emotions, be able to name them, realize how important they are. How do they help us? How they don't? Because everything has a pro and con, right? Then being able to describe. So when we say description, it basically you observe your emotion, which is a mindful practice, and then you describe by using words to label that emotion. For example, I might say, oh, I'm noticing that I'm having these thoughts, I'm feeling these sensations in my body. I'm really anxious because I'm thinking about some future disaster. So that is basically understanding and also describing your emotion. The three main core skills that address in decreasing the frequency and intensity of unwanted emotions include check the facts, opposite action, and problem solving. These help reduce the pain in the moment and in the long term, and the long term leads to decreasing their frequency in future. Somehow human beings move to emotional mind by default in case of adversities. This is somehow a biological deficit we all have. So therefore, irrational thoughts can kind of come in more quickly and provoke strong unwanted emotions. Because the moment we go into those irrational thoughts that are not based on facts, that are not based on social reality, they are going to create emotional disturbance. And then the emotions take over, making us unable to think straight. Because I think we all know that when we are into an emotion which is strong and very challenging, we can't think straight, we can't think rationally, and the emotion takes over. So checking the fact helps us to open the door to the reasonable mind and see things more logically. So again, this needs practice. So there's a whole process of identifying the event that started kind of provoked your thought process, identifying your thoughts, and then finding out which thoughts were actually creating my anxiety, my anger, or my low mood. So anxiety is usually about jumping to conclusions of some catastrophe and then catastrophizing the situation. For example, I might be laid off. This fear is present in most of us nowadays, that I might be laid off from my job, because this is happening so often around us. So this is a very justifiable emotion, but staying and acting on that anxiety is not really helpful, right? So what do? We need to check the fact so that at least our anxiety goes down to concern, where we are aware that this is a challenging situation and this is a possibility. But you know what? Mindfulness would say it hasn't happened right now. Maybe we need to problem solve. Again, another skill that we might use in a combination, that if there's a likelihood that I might be laid off, then I need to have a backup plan. So problem solving itself can be very emotional regulatory skill, and we use it all the time. So it means we are using our wise mind, maybe sometimes not intentionally, but it does come into hand all the time. So problem solving, when you are facing a trouble, problem solving can really help you to decrease that pain and intensity of emotion. Because then you are telling yourself, oh, there's a way out. I can process this, right? The third one, which is in the center, second one listed over here, is the opposite action. And this is something that helps us to move towards behaviors that are effective in that moment. Because we do know when we are anxious or we are angry, we will, and strong emotion will make us behave ineffectively. So what we do is we choose a behavior that is opposite of that impulse. For example, if I'm very angry, I have to plan ahead for a gentle behavior in that situation. If I'm socially anxious and I want to avoid a party or an event, then the thing is, I'm going to go and engage in that activity and get over that emotion by staying in that emotion, because that usually happens. Opposite action, remember, is for those situations which are not dangerous and doable. All right. I typically tell my clients that, remember the Nike slogan that just do it? So first of all, think, is this behavior or this action will there be any trouble? Will there be any negative consequences? If that is the case, then you have to plan for it, problem solve it, right? So maybe you go for the opposite action, that you're going to attend the party and you know that you will be distressed or anxious there. Okay, what are the skills I'm going to use? Problem solving, right? Plan ahead. I'm going to use spaced breathing. I'm going to do a body scan, or I'm just going to observe things, grounding exercises. So you plan ahead and you do the opposite action. So many times engaging in these effective behaviors help us to overcome our fears and realize that it was not as bad as we thought. And I'm pretty sure that we've said this many times, that we go into a situation that we were hesitant to go in, or like watch a movie even. We thought, I don't think this is going to be good, but you really had a fun time going to the movies. However, sometimes it could be the other way around. You thought, oh my God, there are good reviews about this movie. And then it turns out it wasn't, right? We can't really predict future, but at least we can take calculated risks where we don't end up totally sort of devastated, of course. but at least go into situations that we might not enjoy that much, because that in itself will build that emotional muscle that, okay, things are not going the way I like them to, but I'm not going to be affected that much because this is how it is. So again, that acceptance of reality does play an important role. So check the facts is very similar to something which you might have heard about from a CBT perspective of cognitive reframing, where we change the way we look at things, we change our perceptions, our thoughts about the situation, which are based on social reality, of course. And when we do that, we are able to have a different, a change in our emotion intensity. So an anxiety might change into concern, anger might change into annoyance. And that is what we want to do, not get rid of emotion, but take away that dysregulation or that distress that we might be experiencing with strong, unwanted emotions. The other two aspects or skills that focus emotional regulation are ABC Please, which basically focuses on accumulating positive emotions, the A. And you must have noticed that Marsha Linehan, who developed DBT, loves acronyms, and she has a lot of skills that are part of that acronym. So ABC skill is basically, A stands for accumulating positive emotions, short term and long term. And these include having pleasant events and experiences on a daily basis, and also following life goals based on our values. So when we are able to do that, accumulate positive emotions, we kind of develop that resilience. It's like when you add money in your piggy bank or in some investment, and when you have a challenging situation, financial crisis, then you can pull out some money from there, right? Similarly, if you have that piggy bank or reservoir of positive emotions, you're kind of more strong when some adversity comes, and therefore you will not end up totally getting emotionally dysregulated. So it's kind of a buffer for that. So accumulating positive emotions helps us to develop more resilience in that. The B stands for building mastery. So building mastery, any skills, whether it's knitting, whether it's any other hobby that you want to develop, or maybe DBT skills. So if you develop competence and mastery over certain skills, what will happen is that your self-confidence will go up. And the more high self-confidence, the better self-esteem. So they go hand in hand. So people who have a higher self-confidence and higher self-esteem, they are more resilient. They are able to take stress and manage stress more effectively because they believe that they can do it, right? So when you have that, you are kind of on an opposite point of, I can't deal with this, I don't know what to do about it. So when you know how to deal with certain things, if you're aware of them, you know how to do it, and you've learned those skills, then you are building that mastery. The important part is that when you build those mastery, don't develop a goal which is too challenging, because then it becomes hard to achieve that goal. So make smart goals which are specific, clear, though a bit challenging, but something that is achievable and easy to, and then grade your difficulty level higher if you want to. For example, if you started painting, you could be first learning how to do strokes, and then you go on to filling some painting that is kind of doesn't have too many fine details. And then if you still find that interesting, then you go into finer strokes and you enhance your skill to paint, right? Same goes with mental health skills. So you can start with less like lighter weights in the gym to develop that strength, muscle strength. Similarly, with mental health skills, you can always start with milder emotions to address, like check the facts, and then work on difficult things. C basically is coping ahead. This is a skill which is about planning for difficult situations and knowing what skills to use and practicing it in your imagination. So when you practice things in your imagination, you are kind of prepared how to use the skill in that situation. You know what, people who are theater performers, actors, people who do presentations, athletes, they make use of the scope ahead skill very often. That's part of their training. So they train themselves to imagine themselves being in that situation and doing things effectively. So the more you practice that effective behavior in your mind, you're more likely to use it effectively in the moment. After ABC skills, we'll talk about please. And I think I've mentioned that earlier too. So please, again, is the acronym for PL is for physical health. You take care of your physical health, eating, exercise, avoiding mood altering substances like alcohol or even caffeine, and eating. So it's like that self-care. And as I mentioned earlier, these are those wheels that are running automatically in our system. So if we keep oiling them efficiently and sufficiently, what will happen is that they'll not get rusty and they will not interfere with our mind and our emotional dysregulation. Remember, I mentioned that mind and body are connected. So if our body is healthy and we are taking care of our bodily needs, the likelihood is that our our wise mind will also work well. So they help each other. So the main purpose is to increase positive emotions when we are trying to reduce vulnerability. So you are less likely to become emotionally dysregulated if you are engaging in the ABC please skills. It doesn't mean that you will never, ever be dysregulated, but the chances are less. And of course, the ultimate goal of emotional regulation is to decrease emotional suffering. So it's like letting go of that emotional pain through mindfulness. So you see how we go back to mindfulness all the time. So it's about, yeah, this is an emotion that is painful. I'm afraid, I'm anxious, I'm overwhelmed. It is what it is. What can help me to address it? So interestingly, when we start accepting strong, unwanted emotions, the pain or the suffering goes down to begin with it for a starters. And then you can lean into any other skill that will help you to reduce that emotional pain. The social world we live in creates certain beliefs.
Yes.
Social media, movies, people around us, what they say, and what we've learned. So when we absorb those values that certain cultures are holding at top, then we tend to follow. It's like a herd behavior.
Yeah,
so it's important in DBT. What we help people to learn is that you are unique.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know your strengths and maybe weaknesses, and what will work best for you. So you don't really have to do what others are doing. But if you choose to, again, people choose not to, some people are not very ambitious, which is rare now because of that push we have from our society to be independent, to be productive, to be on your feet, earning this much. You're only going to be good enough, you are earning this much. And people keep, again, this is more of a lot of to check the facts that what's good or bad. It's just a concept, right? So usually we tend to go into those all and none thinking. So if I'm not earning this much, then I'm not good enough. If I don't get grade with grades of A and A plus, then nothing. So and this is perpetuated by parents, right? If a kid doesn't get 80 plus percentage, then if it's at 79, that's not good enough. 80 plus is good enough. So this is how we learn things. But the important part is to know yourself and see what is more effective for you and what are your guiding stars or guiding values. What is most important? Because sometimes those values are pushed onto us from others, like productivity, to be independent, to be earning certain amount. These are culturally construed, right? So we need to know, is this social value a healthy value or not? Is it good for me? And maybe we compare and contrast. This is human nature. But the important part is not to move from this compare and contrast where we see the differences to go to the judgment of evaluation of good and bad. Am I worthy enough? Am I good enough? Because when we don't reach those bars that we've set ourselves or by others, that we end up feeling bad about ourselves. We feel broken, we feel that we are wrong, we are weak, and we are not worthy. And you know what? Everybody is worthy of love, care, and affection and dignity, not only from others, but from ourselves. So, yes, there is an increasing uh, stimulation. Newborn kids are being exposed to so much stimulation, toys, gadgets, and that has kind of increased the sensation-seeking trait in human beings as a whole, as a species, and we end up wanting to get stimulation more and more, and that can create a lot of concerns of how we sort of develop the life we want to have. And of course, these are social values to be productive. If you're not, then it's wrong. You should be independent. And pushing emotions down to deal with the stress can also be a coping strategy, but not a very effective one in the long run. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you can suppress your emotions to deal with the important things in the present moment. For example, if I'm grieving or I'm upset, but I have to attend a meeting, then pushing my emotions aside for the time being mindful and present in the meeting is important, and then get back to that emotion to deal and address that later can also be done. So avoidance of emotion short term is not a bad thing if it's a more functional way of doing it. So therefore, DBT is not like this is right, this is wrong. What works and what is the combination? Emotional validation is something that you need to tell yourself that our emotions are valid, true experiences. Nobody can tell you that you can't have emotions or you shouldn't have felt like this. That's actually invalidation. However, we need to see how is that emotion playing out. Right. What do I end up doing as a consequence of that emotional experience? So if I'm ending up in a behavior that is ineffective, is making things worse for me, or it's creating more fires, troubles in my relationship, more conflicts, then that's what we need to address.